Welcome to another episode of the ViniMark podcast, where we host the sorts of conversations that are taking place along the rough edges of wine commerce, science, cellar mastery, and viticulture. In today's episode, we speak to senior researcher Eleonora Alsop from the entomology department at the Viticulture Research Farm of Nuitverbay in Stellenbosch. I first encountered Eleonora's work when she gave a talk on the very clear and present danger that phylloxera poses to grape farmers in South Africa. Now, if you're saying to yourself, I don't even know what phylloxera is, well, you're not alone. Shockingly, it seems that there are large parts of the grape industry who seem to have forgotten what it is as well. And yet, some might argue that the global phylloxera outbreak of the late 1800s was probably the single most significant tragedy in the modern age of viticulture. Now, in our conversation with Eleonora, she takes us through a little bit of the global history of phylloxera, but also how to avoid its rather devastating history from repeating itself in the modern era here in South Africa. Eleonora, I want to thank you so much for taking time to share your thoughts. I think I first discovered your work when you gave an amazing lecture at SASIF in 2023, and it just blew my mind how you spoke about phylloxera with kind of such a fresh zeal and I guess urgency. And I thought we can't not talk more about this. But given that our listeners are both wine professionals and also wine consumers, I wanted to take a tiny step back and get you to tell me, for those who don't know, what is phylloxera?
Phylloxera is essentially an aphid, similar to what you see on your roses and your tomatoes in the garden, but it basically spends most of its life underground, living on the roots of its host plants. Now, the interesting thing is, phylloxera originates from the southeastern United States, around the Mississippi Basin, where a lot of wild indigenous grape varieties also originate. So their only host plant is grapevines, Vitis species. They do not attack any other plant roots, and they obviously evolve together with their host plants there. So the wild grapevines in those areas of the states have developed a level of resistance and tolerance with the phylloxera. And basically, the phylloxera, they've got needle-like mouth parts, almost like a hypodermic syringe. And they sit just behind the growth tips of the fine roots of the plant. Now, remember, the fine roots are the roots that are responsible for taking up nutrients. The bigger, thicker roots, those are the ones that anchor the plant, but all absorption of nutrients and water takes place with these new little fine roots. So they go and sit just behind the tips of these, and where they feed on the root, their saliva induces the growth of a gall, a very characteristic sort of hook-shaped gall. And these galls grow very quickly. So the cells multiply very fast and they essentially intercept the nutrients that should have gone to the above ground parts of the plant. So the insect basically intercepts the nutrients, they feed on it, and as they deplete the nutrients in these galls, the galls start dying back, and so do the little fine roots. So the upshot of phylloxera infestation on your vine's roots is that the whole root system is compromised and slowly starts dying. And of course, if the roots don't function, nothing above ground is going to function. And that is how they kill the plant, because they kill it by killing the roots.
So it's a little more complicated than phylloxera just eating roots. It's actually quite a clever little system. They almost develop these little storehouses on the roots that divert nutrients into the galls. Do those galls, are they only visible in the roots or do they show signs above ground?
Vitis vinifera, being of European origin, its roots are extremely susceptible to phylloxera. It's got no resistance to phylloxera. But interestingly enough, the leaves are resistant to the leaf form. So in South Africa, we will see in a commercial vineyard, you will see phylloxera galls on the roots if the soil or the plants are infested. But You will not see the leaf galls unless you are dealing with particular rootstock cultivars, these wild rootstocks from the States, or if you have a cultivar that is a hybrid cultivar where one of the parents is actually one of these wild cultivars, from not wild cultivars, wild rootstocks from its origin in the States.
Some people may be wondering, okay, well, why are we going into such detail about a little root pest? There are surely plenty of pests that make life difficult for viticulturists and grape farmers. But phylloxera was a global pandemic. Can you tell us a little bit about just the extent to which phylloxera has affected the global grape farming industry?
Somewhere between 1854 1860, grape growers in Europe were very worried because remember, those days they didn't have all the fungicides that we have access to today. And diseases like downy mildew were causing, and even powdery mildew were causing severe losses in the wine industries in Europe. So they discovered that these wild United American grapevines, Vitis riparia, Vitis rupestris, Vitis Labrusca and Estevalis, they all hail from the Midwestern United States. Now, anyone who knows anything about places around the Mississippi Basin, these are the southern states. So we're talking places like Mississippi, Missouri, Alabama. Those places have quite warm, moist, almost subtropical climates. And they discovered that those grapevines were resistant to oidium, to powdery mildew. So they thought, aha, they wanted to hybridize those wild vines with the European vines to breed disease-resistant grapevines. What they did not know was that there was a thing called phylloxera, and these tiny little phylloxera larvae sitting on the roots of these plants that they brought across then invaded the vineyards, started in France, and it just devastated the industry there because, as I've mentioned before, Vitis vinifera, being of European origin, it had simply no resistance to cope with phylloxera. And it took quite a few years for people to even understand what was happening. They didn't know what was killing their vine.
What kind of damage were we talking about?
Hectares and hectares and hectares. So they were basically facing, there were at the time certain estates would basically lose all their vineyards. The thing to remember, phylloxera likes heavier soil, so soil with a little bit more silt and clay. It does not like in areas where vines were planted on sandy soils or some of the shale soils like you have in some of the river valleys there in Germany and that. Phylloxera doesn't do well there, so it wasn't a problem there. But in any of the areas where the soil was a little bit heavier, it just caused mass die-off of vines. And I think that is perhaps also part of the reason why it took a while for people to figure out what was going on, because it was in certain areas, but we know that some of the prized French chateaux and estates were specifically in areas where the soil is a little heavier, because that allows it to hold enough water to see the vines through the warm parts of the summer, and it was just total devastation. Eventually, they cottoned on that maybe grafting it onto some of these wild vine rootstocks would be a way out. They tried that and that worked. Now, as far as South Africa is concerned, the wine industry was still very small and localized in certain areas in South Africa in the late 1800s, and there is still dispute. I've had a look at some very interesting historical records from the 1890s, from reports in Parliament and everywhere, but there's no absolute certainty of exactly when it came in. But it did come in somewhere between 1862 and 1892 with plant material from outside. Predictably, it caused the same devastation in South Africa, where vines were also still planted on their own roots. It was only when they started adopting the same technique as in Europe of grafting onto wild American rootstocks that are phylloxera resistant that they managed to resurrect, as it were, our wine industry and save it from total devastation. The problem is that once we started using the grafting technique, there was a perception that, well, we've got phylloxera solved and we don't have to worry about phylloxera. But I think the important thing is to remember that when you talk about resistance, it's not just, it's not like the vines have an impenetrable shield. We're not in Star Trek where they put a shield around the battleship and nothing can get in. The reality is that the rootstocks that we use today, they are not just the straight Vitis rupestris or Vitis riparia. They are usually hybrids, often between a Vitis vinifera type and one of these other wild types. So we find that the resistance in our so-called resistant rootstocks is not an absolute resistance. As long as the rootstock grows well and vigorously, phylloxera can't really make headway on it, but they can still exist on it. And that is what we found in our recently completed survey that we did, where we went throughout the country and we found phylloxera in very small numbers, but we found it persisting on the resistant rootstocks. It didn't cause any discernible economic damage, but the problem is they're sitting there. The danger is now, because the level of resistance or tolerance is maybe a better term, depends on the vigor of the rootstock. If something happens and your rootstock is no longer growing that well, this can be a physical thing like drought stress or heat combined with drought stress, but we've also seen issues where a vineyard became infested with nematodes, and the nematodes proliferated massively. They weaken the root system, and then the phylloxera that's already sitting there can start getting the upper hand.
I was fascinated to think that it's been 125 years roughly since we've kind of got a handle on phylloxera in South Africa, in the sense that we began using grafted vines and the industry was able to recover. And we now are at the point where we are the 8th biggest producer of wine in the world. And yet 125 years later, have we progressed at all in our ability to deal with phylloxera directly, as opposed to just avoiding it by keeping the plant safe above the ground?
There are options, and if you use some of the systemic insecticides that you apply as soil drenches, it will kill some of the, at least most of the phylloxera feeding on the roots. The issue with that is just that those products are increasingly under pressure internationally, because in other crops, especially those systemic products, your neonicotinoids, get taken up. It goes into the flowers, into the pollen and the nectar, and it has an effect downstream on your pollinators. So in countries in Europe, the use of many of these neonicotinoids has actually already been banned. That is really the only way of dealing with it. It doesn't really help to fumigate the soil, because if you bring in plant material and the phylloxera is sitting on the roots, then you are bringing it everywhere. The key is that we should really not be spreading phylloxera from our nurseries, because one of the other dangers that worry me is that nowadays, with newer cultivars coming in, and it is perhaps even more of an issue when you deal with something like the table grape industry, there's a tremendous pressure to get the next new cultivar, the next new thing that the market wants. We are now not only grafting vines onto rootstocks for phylloxera management. In fact, nowadays, when growers and nurserymen are looking at rootstock for a particular cultivar, phylloxera is almost not even on their radar because we're looking at things like drought resistance or adaptation to different soil types like saline soils and a host of other reasons why we use a rootstock. So if there's now a pressure to use new rootstocks and in the haste to get all of these things on the market, if sufficient effort is not invested in making sure what is the phylloxera resistance or tolerance status of these things.
This is what you were saying in your talk last year, which fascinated me, was that it feels as if the mental space of grape farmers, they're under a lot of pressure from all sides, economic, environmental, and it feels as if they've just forgotten about what is arguably the most consequential threat in wine growing over the last 250 years. There's been nothing more consequential than what phylloxera did to the global grape industry. And yet, unbelievably, people have forgotten that it's still a threat.
Yeah, it's sort of slipped off the radar because there was this perception, yeah, well, we've got resistant rootstock, so what are you worried about? The problem is because of that attitude, there has been also a lackadaisical kind of attitude in many nurseries. And the consequence of that is that we have transported phylloxera with plant material because it doesn't spread any other way. The only way phylloxera got from the Western Cape to the vineyards along the Orange River Valley is by plant material. And it was taken there by people. And you now have vineyards everywhere that have low levels of phylloxera on resistant rootstocks. And I think that is also, there was a misunderstanding or a lack of information maybe that growers and nurseries thought the resistant rootstocks meant that phylloxera can't attack it and can't live on it. Well, it can, which is also why I think it's more appropriate that we should talk of tolerant rootstocks rather than resistant, because it creates a false sense of security. And I think that is perhaps the best way of describing what's happened in our industry, that everyone was lulled into this false sense of security. We've got resistant rootstocks, so we can stop worrying about phylloxera. Let's worry about the other things. The problem is in doing so and having that attitude in our nursery industry, we have now managed to distribute it to everywhere where we actually grow the grapes more or less in suitable soil. On all the farms that we surveyed, and it was about just over 80 farms, not one of the growers were aware that there was phylloxera in those blocks. So if you now replant and you plant a rootstock that is not resistant or tolerant to phylloxera, those young vines don't have a chance.
It feels like policymakers should all be forced to study history because we know that the phylloxera spread from the United States to Europe by people shipping plants. And so we've known that for hundreds of years. And yet, again, the nurseries were unaware that they were, in fact, exacerbating the problem. Are there protocols in place now to make sure that this stops?
There are. The Vine Improvement Association has got standard operating procedures in place for registered material, but it's difficult because what the protocols mostly stipulate is that the plants must be visually free of the galls. But the problem is if you have one or two overwintering first instar phylloxera larvae on the root, a normal visual inspection is not going to see that. You will struggle to see it under the microscope. So it's not a matter of looking at it visually, it is a matter of adjusting your whole process in a nursery to make sure you keep these pests out. But that is not always so easy to do because every time you have a practice to curb one pest, that is an additional cost item for the nursery. So I think that is also part of the dilemma, that they're trying to curb costs, but you're trying to reach a balance between being safe and being cost effective.
Chile is the only country, as far as I'm aware that has never had a phylloxera outbreak. And I know the thought is that they were just so extremely isolated that it reached there at the time when it was destroying vines all around the world. But 150 years later, they are still phylloxera free. So what are they doing that is so effective?
I'm not an expert on the Chilean wine industry. I know one has to look at climatic factors. Where exactly are their wine grape vineyards, their table grape vineyards? What are the soil types? Because that is a critical thing. There are many areas and there are many farms in South Africa where there is no phylloxera because the soil is too sandy. So it will only be in certain regions. Australia has had outbreaks, but again, because it came in with plant material, the problem is that while you can have great regulations, it is possible for a shipment of plant material coming in to miss one or two little phylloxera sitting on the roots when they are so small. What South Africa, I think, lately has done, they encourage more and more countries do that. They don't actually import rooted plant material, so you don't bring in roots. But it's only in certain areas of Australia. I think it's around New South Wales and South Australia, that area. Western Australia and other regions haven't got phylloxera yet, which is why they are very set in those areas on their biosecurity strategies because they don't want to transport it there. But there's always, when you have growers and people bring in little slips and little bits here and there, that is often a problem. How exactly Chile has avoided, I don't know. I'm also not sure how certain they are that it isn't anywhere.
And a lot of their vines are still grown on their original roots. And this is because, like those Australian farmers that you just mentioned, they are supremely smug about how superior their wines are because of their original roots.
Well, there's been a lot of debate and work about that, and there is still no scientifically proven evidence for that. People have tried to compare because the reality is all your top French wines are produced on grafted plants. So are they really saying that their wines are superior to everyone else's in the world? I don't believe that for a moment. Because, as I've mentioned before, there are now also increasingly other reasons why people use grafted vine, especially with climate change. They are looking to use rootstocks that are better adapted to lower water or periods of drought, or to cope with soil salinity and things like that. So while they would like to believe that makes their wines superior, there has not been any conclusive scientific evidence to back that up.
What can farmers do in order to be more vigilant on their own properties?
The first thing is to have good communication with your nursery. So the nursery that supplies you with your planting material should be as close to you as your bank manager. You need to insist that they supply you material, even if it is a supposedly more resistant or tolerant rootstock. Ask them, can you certify or guarantee that you don't have phylloxera in here? Because I don't want it on my farm. The other thing is, firstly, that growers must know what phylloxera is, because it has been disconcerting to me speaking to the farmers when we were arranging to go and do the survey, and too many cases to be comfortable with. The first question from their side is, what is phylloxera? That is concerning, I think, because very often vineyards are left in the care of managers. While they may be versed in all other aspects of viticulture, clearly there are gaps when it comes to the pests and diseases, because the feeling is that the agents that they use, their chemical advisors, will look after the pests and the diseases, but you do still need to be aware of what the risk factors are. If you're going to replant that vineyard, what we recommend is that after you have removed the last harvest from that block, before the root growth stops, because remember, after the harvest, there is another period of active root growth because the grapevine now has to take up nutrients to store its reserves for budding in the next season. So in that post-harvest root activity period, you can then apply one of the systemic soil insecticides to take care of whatever phylloxera is still sitting, because remember, this is the time when the phylloxera population is at its peak. So you want to kill the phylloxera that's sitting on the roots. When you have removed the vineyard, make sure you get as many of the roots out as you can. And then if you're going to plant immediately after the winter, if you're not going to have a rotational cover crop or something, or cash crop on that soil for a season or more, then it is a good idea, once you have planted your young vine that are not going to give you a harvest until 2 years later, that you also apply, just after budding, you apply a soil drench systemic insecticide again. The purpose of that is just to protect your young vines from any of the phylloxera that may have remained in the soil. And it will also have a dual purpose. If we think of our anti-leaf roll virus strategy, the leaf roll virus is transmitted by mealybugs. So if you apply your systemic insecticide just after planting of the young vines, it will kill and prevent phylloxera in the soil from establishing on the root system, and above ground it will also prevent mealybug from infesting your young vines. You need to know all the heavier soils on your farm. You need to look, do you have phylloxera? If you have it, bear that in mind when you do your next replant. Make sure you get the tolerant or resistant rootstock, and that you try and get rid of as much of that population of phylloxera before you plant your young vines. Give them the best chance to get a good start.
Eleonora, thank you for giving so much time. I found it fascinating, just not only to learn how the problem spread, but also the fact that there are people still fighting this problem today. And I'm so glad to be able to spread this message to make sure that we don't suffer the kind of tragedy that we did suffer roughly 140 years ago.
No, that is true. We do not want history to repeat itself.
Yeah, thank you again. And I look forward to chatting to you again sometime soon.
You're welcome anytime.
We've reached the end of another episode of the ViniMark podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing to the channel so that you can join us for more conversations around wine commerce, wine science, cellar mastery, marketing, and the rising trends amidst the industry's more adventurous pioneers.